license.
I think once they're within reason, they're all fine. It's good for the area generally.
The Health Minister says a full systems-wide review is needed to ensure the organs of dead babies are not sent abroad for incineration. Stephen Donnelly has been speaking after the organs of 18 babies were sent abroad without their parents' knowledge. Sarah Everard's killer will remain in prison until he dies after being sentenced to a rare whole-life term. The then-serving police officer Wayne Cousins kidnapped Sarah in South London in March before kidnapping and killing her. The first event at a nightclub since the start of the pandemic is getting underway in Dublin shortly. 450 people have tickets for the pilot event at the Button Factory and must show a digital COVID cert and a negative antigen test. 9:02.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to Ryanair. Enjoy a midterm getaway to Malaga, Faro, Gran Canaria and more, with 60,000 more seats now on sale.
Friday will be a cool, windy day with sunny spells and scattered showers. Highest temperatures of 13 to 15 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Your chance to win big. News Talk's cash machine.
Yeah, we opened the lines this morning for your chance to win big cash with our new game, News Talk's Cash Machine. Today there was €5,555, 55 cent in the cash machine. And when we called Lisa Clark in Sligo after 3 o'clock, she picked up within 5 rings and told us the correct amount, meaning she walks away with all that money. Don't worry, we'll be topping up the cash machine tomorrow morning on News Talk Breakfast. Tune in at 8 a.m. when we will tell you exactly how much you could win. So, up next, it's the football show.
The Football Show on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Don't miss Brighton versus Arsenal on Saturday Night Football. Live on Sky Sports.
I'm prepared to do anything I can to play for my country again.
Do it then. What about your start to the game?
It wasn't bad, was it?
Why should there be an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
All right, it is Thursday's football show. Nathan with you until 10 o'clock. There is your live Europa League and Europa Conference League ongoing at the moment. West Ham are 1-0 up against Rapid Vienna. Second half just getting underway at the London Stadium. The goal from Declan Rice. Celtic 2-0 down at half-time at Parkhead in their game against Bayer Leverkusen. Of course, Celtic also lost their opening game in that group. Earlier on in the Europa League, Rangers were beaten 1-0 by Sparta Prague, while Leicester were beaten 1-0 away at Legia Warsaw. Slow start of the campaign for Brendan Rodgers' side. Slow start of the season for Brendan Rodgers' side. And in the Europa Conference League, Tottenham are playing more of Slovenia and they lead by 2-0 at half-time at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Dele Alli with a penalty, Giovanni Lo Celso with a goal as well inside 8 minutes. A reminder, we've got a double header of live Premier League action right here on Off the Ball this coming Sunday, including the biggest game of the season so far. It will be Liverpool against Manchester City from 4:30. Myself and Kenny Cunningham will be talking you through that one. And before that, we've got Spurs against Aston Villa. Brian Kerr will be alongside Bernard O'Toole. So all that coming your way on this Sunday. We're going to be talking to Kathleen McNamee in a moment about the WSL and the start of the season with that, and also a big breaking story from America and from the US League and North Carolina Courage, which is the club that Denise O'Sullivan plays for, and Diane Caldwell. Their coach has been fired this evening after accusations of improper conduct involving several of the players. We're going to talk to Kathleen and get the full details on that as well. I'd like to say also that starting from tonight, all our football coverage on Off the Ball is going to be brought to you by Sky. We're delighted to have Sky on board for the rest of the season, and of course, I'm sure as you know, all the football you love is in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sports and Premier Sports. We've got lots of exciting things lined up with Sky over the coming months for you to look forward to. Now, Stephen Kenny announced his Republic of Ireland squad a little bit earlier today. No massive surprises, but except for the inclusion of one Will Keane. Will Keane, brother of England international Michael Keane. He's now a Wigan Athletic striker, and he has received his first international call-up to the Irish squad, having scored 4 goals in the opening 9 matches of the League One season. Enda Stevens back in despite some injury doubts with Sheffield United. Jason Knight is there as well, and Chiodzi Ogbena. No place for Seamus Coleman or Darragh O'Shea. O'Shea definitely out, as we know. Seamus Coleman, though, I saw video today back doing some running with Everton, so knowing Seamus Coleman, I'm sure he would be desperate to get over and play against that game in Azerbaijan on Saturday week, and also the friendly against Qatar. Gavin Cooney from the 42.ie is with us. How are you keeping, Gavin?
Hey, Nathan.
So Stephen Kenny back in front of the media today. We obviously heard Keith Andrews giving an in-depth analysis of what's been going on in the Republic of Ireland camp and the work that they feel they're doing, the progress they feel they're making. What was the dominant theme of today's press conference?
Are you the right man for the job, Stephen? Like, that's now the drama, Nathan. Like, we're not going to qualify, sadly. We knew that when we lost to Luxembourg. There's no real drama to get excited about in terms of players being left out. Like, we can usually point to an exclusion and harass the manager and ask them, why isn't so-and-so included? And I know there's a few experienced players out in the cold at the moment, but there's no compelling reason why they should be in. So the press conference was dominated about talk, well, initially about Will Keane and why Kenny has brought him up. And then a lot of it focused on the fact that, do you need a win, Stephen, because the review and the thumbs up or the thumbs down is coming from the FAI board when all this qualification campaign wraps up next month.
Does that conversation continue to dominate everything until a new contract is signed? Do results make a difference? Does a win against Azerbaijan and a win against Luxembourg and a performance at home against Portugal, does that soften that conversation, or is this just going to be the main topic until a new contract is signed, or not, one way or another?
I kind of expect that it to remain the main topic regardless, just because, we're not going to qualify. So, like, what else is the dominant narrative and the dominant theme around these games? But like you say, like, if they do win in Azerbaijan, it'll quell some of the hysteria and a lot of the noise around that question and that debate.
Yeah. You mentioned Will Keane. This was sort of a bolt from the blue. I think we have Stephen Kenny talking about Will Keane. Here's what he had to say.
Yeah, to be fair, it's not something, that I've initiated. Like, Will has been qualified for the last couple of years now, and I did have a conversation with him. I met him after one of the games and had a good chat with him recently, and actually earlier in the season we had a good chat, and then his form has been very consistent. I think he had injuries the last couple of years and he wasn't playing maybe as consistently, but he's good to watch. Like, he's a very clever player, good touch and good awareness, and he's an intelligent footballer. So if he can keep getting the running, he seems to be enjoying his football at Wigan and doing well. So it is League One, admittedly, but he has he's impressed anyway. Anytime we go to see him, he's impressed us, and anytime I've gone to see him, so he's been important for them this season.
Yeah, so Will Keane, Gavin, is one of those names that's been sort of around the Irish football conversation for probably a decade at this stage, because his brother Michael, who's playing for Everton, is an England international. So Michael played for the Republic of Ireland at underage level. Will actually never did, but they were both at Manchester United together as kids. So obviously when there's a young potential Irish player at Manchester United, there's excitement. He's turned into a bit of a journeyman, really, Will Keane. Does he deserve to be in this squad?
It is a bit of a surprise that he's been called up, really, isn't it? Like, he did declare under Mick McCarthy back at the beginning of 2019, and it is like the kind of call-up you would associate with the previous managers. That, in fairness, we've often criticised previous managers for calling up a guy who didn't play underage with Ireland. He's 28 now. He's scoring a few goals in League One. But the prism through which we always criticise that decision is that it's always come at the expense of blooding a young Irish player. You can't, of all the criticism that you can level at Stephen Kenny, you can't level that one at it. So I think it is a bit of a surprise. Like, Kenny was talking today about the fact that he's finally got a run of games this season, but he had a run of games last season. Like, he played 34 times last season, and he played 29 times the season before last. So Kenny would obviously have been aware of him throughout his time in charge, and Stephen's had the job since April of last year. But they must see something in Will Keane and must have seen something in the previous window which they feel that he can address. Now, Kenny talked about the fact that he can lead the line, but he hasn't really been leading the line for Wigan in League One this season. He scored 4 goals, but he scored it almost as a number 10. Wigan play a 4-2-3-1. But he also talked to him, the player, the qualities that he attributed to him, Nathan, actually reminded me of the qualities that we haven't had in the team since David McGoldrick left. He talked about his link-up play, his ability to drop deep, and his weight of pass and his awareness of other players around him. And he also talked about the fact that he could score goals with his head. And I mean, maybe Stephen Kenny has looked back at all those crosses that went in against Azerbaijan and all those chances that went to begging and say maybe Will Keane can solve that problem. And you kind of forget like how highly rated this guy was a few years ago. Like, I mean, he made his debut for Alex Ferguson's Manchester United, I think around 2011, 2012. He was likened to Dimitar Berbatov at the time. He was in an FA Youth Cup team along with Ravel Morrison and Paul Pogba. He made his debut ahead of Pogba, if you remember, in that game against Blackburn on what I think was Alex Ferguson's 70th birthday or something. I think that game is chiefly remembered for. Also remembered for a 3-2 defeat and the reason that Pogba packed up and left for Juventus. But then injuries just got in the way. And then even as recently as 2016, there is a kind of a sliding doors moment because he plays in an FA Cup tie for Manchester United against Shrewsbury, a game in which Marcus Rashford isn't even in the squad, but he injures his groin and then a few days later is out of contention when Anthony Martial gets injured ahead of a European tie against Midtjylland. So Rashford gets his go. He scores 2 goals and the rest is history.
Yeah, and Will Keane, many years later, finds himself in a Republic of Ireland squad. It does feel as though Stephen Kenny, even though he's not admitting it publicly, is very much committed to a new generation of Irish footballers, because there are experienced players there that are playing football that he's decided aren't part of this anymore. So Kieran Clark, from what I can gather, hasn't retired from international football, but isn't in this squad. Darren Randolph hasn't retired, isn't playing football, really isn't even involved in the first team squad at West Ham, but hasn't retired and was obviously such a brilliant servant for the Republic of Ireland. And Shane Long came off the bench, 10 minutes granted, and it's been a long time since Shane Long has scored a Premier League goal, and he's 34, 35 at this stage. But these are players that in an extended squad that's lacking a bit of confidence, lacking a bit of experience, maybe you would want around, but it feels as though Stephen Kenny has said, actually, I'm going to trust Jodzi Agbona. I'm going to trust Adam Ida, even though he's not playing much football, ahead of a Shane Long.
Yeah, that's been pretty much the modus operandi. Now, look, it's not like Stephen Kenny has brought in more experienced players, can we say? And the likes of Jeff Hendrick and Shane Duffy have played very well for him. But absolutely, there has always been that preponderance on youth, and like Shane Long, has played all of, I think it's 30 minutes of first team action since the most recent international camp, but Adam Ida's only played about an hour more than that, so he has always trusted youth. You do wonder, like, has there been too much emphasis on it sometimes? Like, you look at the team selection against Azerbaijan with Ida, Connolly and Parrott, what's that, 19, 20 and 21 years of age leading the line. And it did seem a little bit callow. Like, I mean, they didn't react well in the game. Like, if you remember that Azerbaijan game, Ireland started well, like created 3 good chances in the first 10 minutes. And then Azerbaijan played one passing move that cut through the midfield. And then Ireland just did seem to kind of panic and go back into their shells and stop doing the things that they were initially doing. And then that all feeds into what Stephen Kenny said ahead of the Serbia game. He said, we're building I made the decision to build a team for the Euros in 2024. Now, look, he did follow that up by saying it's not like we haven't tried to win these games, but it's obviously a risky strategy for a manager to do that, to build for a campaign for which he doesn't yet have a contract. But this is what Stephen Kenny does. This is what he said he would do, and I mean, it has paid dividends at times, like most obviously with the introduction of Andrew Amabamidele against Portugal and then Serbia. Like, I mean, he's done so well, whereas another Irish manager might include Kieran Clark. And I know Kieran Clark's playing at Premier League level, but what's he really done for Ireland the last couple of years? Yeah,
certainly. I remember ahead of the Serbia game, I was one of those talking him up from how comfortably he looked with the ball at his feet and at Premier League level week in, week out, and unfortunately couldn't show that at all that night against Serbia. Just looked completely out of place, and maybe that's having a massive influence in Stephen Kenny's selection. It does all boil down to results. That we're asking a question about Shane Long because Ireland aren't winning games, whereas if Shane Long was in the squad and Ireland were winning games, we'd be asking, well, why are we sticking with the 34, 35-year-old, and why aren't we giving youth a chance? Likewise, why are we sticking with Darren Randolph if he's not playing any football? We have a Gavin Bazunu who's trying to make his way in the game. And when you're not winning games, everything is going to be overanalyzed. Everything is going to be questioned. How was Stephen Kenny at the press conference? How does he seem to be dealing with these constant questions now about his future?
Yeah, I mean, today he was fine. He was, there were no, like, Kenny can get emotional when he's talking, and we've all heard the clips, and we heard it on your show, and we've heard it in post-game of the Qatar friendly and pre that Serbia game most recently, where he does get worked up and does get passionate and does get emotional. Now, I don't know if everyone likes that. I really like when he does that. Like, it shows his passion for his job, and you're also getting insight into the man is probably the man that's in the dressing room and around his players. Today he was pretty calm about it all, as he often is around squad announcements. Like, it obviously was the recurring question, do you need a win? Like, previously up to now, if you went into a press conference with the express ambition of not getting an answer from Kenny, the question to ask was, is this must win? Because he wouldn't answer it because, in future, after that game, if they didn't win, which invariably they don't win games, he would be hung by the headline. But he did accept today that we need to turn draws into wins. I think at one point he did say we need a victory. So, I mean, I think everyone understands that there is a lot of progress made. And if you have a look at the games and you talk to people around the place and you listen to what the players are saying, clearly there's enthusiasm for the project. Clearly there's things going right. But ultimately, this is going to be a decision made by the FAI board, and the best way to point to your 2024 campaign and tell the board that I'm your manager to win games is to have won at least one game in the run into that.
Yeah. So Ireland have 2 games coming up. There's the competitive game against Azerbaijan and then the friendly against Qatar. He's without Alan Brown and Jason Malumbi, so they're not in the squad because they're suspended. Seamus Coleman, as I mentioned, is injured, though he was out running, I saw, with Dominic Calvert-Lewin today, and we know Coleman, if there's any possibility that he can get involved in any way, he'll be over. So I wouldn't rule Seamus Coleman out completely just yet. A couple of other players who aren't in the squad, and it's such a bizarre scenario for Irish football to find itself in. Jack Byrne, not in the squad, doesn't have a club. So we know now he has left the team over in Cyprus and is not going to have anyone probably till January at this stage. It was sort of undecided, I guess, whether Stephen Kenny really was a big fan of Jack Byrne. But Robbie Brady is a player he's name-checked time and time again. And Robbie Brady has no club. Still, Robbie Brady has no club. And we're heading into October, and you see him at League of Ireland games, sitting beside Stephen Kenny watching them. Like, here's a guy who's 29, who you feel like should have been close to getting a Premier League team, if not a top of the Championship side. And for some reason, there doesn't seem to be an injury issue. Nothing has happened for him. He's just in complete limbo.
It's extraordinary, really, isn't it? Like, go back to Euro 2016, like Robbie Brady scores against Italy. Imagine telling yourself, well, in 5 years' time, Ireland be playing games in October and Robbie Brady won't even have a club. It's really extraordinary. Like, he was released from Burnley. Maybe he was, I don't know, to be honest. Maybe he was hoping for a Premier League move. He is a Premier League standard player. I don't think anyone would dispute that. Maybe mid-table to lower Premier League standard, but that standard nonetheless. He did bristle at the idea that he has an injury record. He's had a couple of long-term injuries recently, but it hasn't been a case where he gets a hamstring. He's actually not like Seamus Coleman, where he gets a hamstring strain and you miss 3 weeks and you come back for 2 months and then you're out with another knock for a month. So it really is quite extraordinary. And the wrinkle now is the fact that the transfer window in the UK is closed. So now he can't move. If he does want to go back to the UK, he can't move until the 1st of January. So I think the Turkish, maybe the US or maybe the Turkish window is open. So maybe that offers some kind of opportunity. But it's just indicative of this. It's so exasperating. It's a wider football debate in Ireland, really. Like, how little control we have of our best players is the kind of thing that the RFU would break out in a cold sweat over with rugby, and did when they lost Johnny Sexton for a couple of years once. Like, the Irish football in a scenario where he is absolutely no control over how often and how many games his most talented players play. So, and I think Stephen Kenny really does keenly feel his absence. Like, when he first took the job, Kenny actually stated one of his main jobs as Irish manager was to rehabilitate Robbie Brady, because he saw him as one of the most talented players we have. And I think we can't forget that. Like, that is like verifiable truth. Like, he is extremely talented and has the kind of guile on the ball and experience and work rate that team is absolutely crying out for. But it's just not worked out. And Brady came in and trained with the squad in September, which I would imagine he would appreciate it. Like, Kenny has obviously kept very close contact with him. He's been training at the AUL complex with Damien Doyle, who's the trainer with the Republic of Ireland team. But it's so disappointing and it's so exasperating, really.
Yeah, and it's really on nights like this when you look again at the Europa League and the European Conference League, the amount of players from all over Europe that are playing in these competitions, from whatever size country, they all have 4 or 5 players. We saw it with Sheriff and with Thielen, the score the goal he scored against Real Madrid. Every other country has 3-4 players just popping up at decent sized clubs around Europe, whereas we look at that Ireland squad again, by and large, with the exception of Josh Cullen, they're totally reliant on English football, and English football is not kind to us right now.
Yeah, no, not at all. Like, we know about like Adam Ida and Andrew Amabamidele were brilliant for Ireland in the internationals and gone back to Norwich. Amabamidele has played one Premier League game and has been bombed out for Grant Hanley and Ozan Kabak, like one of the worst centre back partnerships you'll see in the history of the Premier League. And Adam Ida can't get in the team either, ahead of Timu Pukki, who is not the Timu Pukki everyone remembers from the first 6 weeks of 2 Premier League seasons gone by.
Well, not only that, Adam Ida's about 4th or 5th choice at this stage with the signings they brought in during the summer as well. So
yeah, and it's like the fact that we just Irish players haven't made that move abroad and haven't made the kind of impact in the European games that you talk about. It's just, unless Matt Doherty has scored since I've come on air, like, he's the last Irish player to score a goal in a group stage of UEFA competition. Sorry, we'll clarify that. A player capped by Stephen Kenny.
Graham Carey.
Stage. Yeah, sorry, it was just a Graham Carey stands out that they were going to text in. I had to correct myself for. But Carey hasn't been capped under Kenny. But Doherty's the last Kenny capped to score in a group stage game in 2019. And this week alone, we've seen Mreli, the Azerbaijan forward, scoring against Leicester, and obviously Sebastian Till of Luxembourg score that screamer at the Bernabeu. So it's just another reminder of Ireland's place in the world. And look, we've had this conversation a million times, Nathan, and it depressed the hell out of you. But there are 7 League One players in a 25-man Irish squad today.
Yeah. The Irish people, though, seems still believe in Stephen Kenny. So we had this story exclusively on OTB AM this morning. A survey that we carried out with Ireland Thinks. They spoke to 1,000 people, representative of all strands of society, as you would expect from a survey like this. So 48% think Stephen Kenny should be given a chance for the Euro 2020 qualifiers. Just 12% think Ireland should get a new manager, and the rest had no real interest in football and didn't really care to answer the question. So 80% of people who had an interest in football feel that Stephen Kenny should stay on until Euro 2024. Our man Owen Sheehan was also out in Abbottstown earlier. Here's what he had to say about that poll.
Poll released today where of the people who are invested in the Ireland team, people who follow the Ireland team, 80% want to see this management continue. Is that sort of stuff important to you at all, what the public think and the relationship between this team and the football public?
Well, I don't know, but I think one of the things that the atmosphere in the game against Serbia and Diviva was exceptional. The support got behind the team regardless that we were 1-0 down, really connecting with the players. I think it's from the ground up. We've obviously introduced a high number of players into the squad in the last 7 or 8 months, and I think it's obviously players that it's quite organic, because it's players that have come from clubs throughout the country. It's a reflection of all the good work done by coaches around the country, and a lot of the players have emerged with mixed results. Some have done better than others. And people are excited by an introduction of a high number of players. I think the team is evolving. We wanted to get better. We need more victories. We know that. And we need to turn them draws into wins. And I think when I go out, through the airport and travel to England a lot of time, if I'm in Dublin or anyone else, there's a lot of people excited by the team. They want it to work. They want the team to really evolve and do well. We all want to improve our results, and hopefully we can do that in this window.
Yeah, so Stephen Kenny on the news that 80% of Irish football fans think he should get his contract extended. Do 80% of the FAI board think his contract should be extended, Gavin?
Oh, I don't know. That's the big question that we'll all be trying to find out before they make their decisions come November. I don't it's difficult to judge now, because there are some misgivings among some board members about elements of how he's done his job. That's not to say there's people completely writing him off in there. I don't know if that's the case, but I don't know it's definitely true either. The important thing to kind of remember about this and all the talk about it is the board is no longer one monolithic voice that's expressed by the chief executive. Like, it is there are 12 different people who are encouraged to air their opinions, and they are very different opinions. Like we were speaking to the CEO, Jonathan Hill, after the most recent window. We got a few minutes standing around with him in a huddle in Flannery's Beer Garden, strangely enough. It's strange enough location for it. But like we asked the questions, and then I came away and listened back to the tape and was like, oh my God, he didn't answer a single question there. He said nothing. And I kind of, grudgingly admired him while also criticizing myself as a poor journalist. But you see, like but what can he say, Nathan? Because he knows that he can't speak for the board, because he doesn't like, that's not his job. It's the FAI is different nowadays. So so like that's the big decision. Like, there are misgivings among some board members, absolutely. Other board members are on board. It's not a clear whole picture of like thumbs up and thumbs down. So, but
and how can it be is the other thing. Like, no matter how trenchant you are on one side or the other, like, I think most of that 80% are sort of going, we really want this to work out. We really admire that Bamidele is coming on against Portugal, that we're bringing all these players through. I think most Irish people, football fans, are watching a lot of football. They're smart enough to understand where Ireland is right now, but they also know that you got to get a result at some stage. You got to beat Azerbaijan and you got to beat Luxembourg.
And I think that poll, I think that reflects, like, I think there's a general acceptance that he always uses the team must evolve. Like, Ireland have to evolve the team. Like, there's an idea that we should get rid of Kenny and we go back to, putting in the mixer and putting them under pressure and chasing results and so on. We can't do that for like a whole number of reasons. One, we don't have the players to do it. Like, we don't have Niall Quinn up front anymore.
Well, we don't even have David McGoldrick up front anymore.
True, like, and secondly, like, these players, like the young players we've got coming through, have come through UK academies who have been told to pass the ball. And three, like, no one else plays that way, so they've literally, like, in terms of building out from the back, like the rules of the game have literally changed to ensure people build out from the back, because a couple of seasons ago they tweaked the rules to allow, up to two defenders into the penalty box alongside the goalkeeper for goal kicks. And like, I was just reading, I don't know if you read it, Nathan, you probably have better things to do, but the technical report
I read it
from Euro. The technical report dropped from Euro 2020. It was like it was anticipated in some quarters, as I would imagine Sally Rooney novels are anticipated in more normal quarters of society. And interesting, Packy Bonner was one of the co-authors of that report. He was a board member who will have his say on Stephen Kenny's future. And 35% of goal kicks went short in that tournament across it all. And I just looked at the stats, and Bazuni's averaging 42% of goal kicks short. So we are evolving and playing in the way that the rest of Europe plays. But there is like, Ireland do mix it up a lot more, I think, than has been conveyed by some of the critics. Like, there is an idea among the criticism that we're just passing it backwards and passing it sideways. Ireland, like, firstly, we've changed formations loads. Sorry, I shouldn't use we. Ireland have changed formations plenty of times since Stephen Kenny first came in. It went from 4-3-3 to 4-2-3-1 to this 3-4-3/3-5-2. And like, under McCarthy in 2019, Ireland averaged, 51 long balls a game. They're averaging 43 long balls a game under Stephen Kenny in this qualification campaign. So I think they're a little bit more precise about when they play them. But the idea that we're just knocking it around in circles and going nowhere and not putting opposition teams under pressure isn't actually borne out in reality.
Will you get back to your technical report now, Gavin? Stephen Kenny is 100% walking into that FAI board meeting with that technical report saying, we're pretty much doing all of this, just give me a little bit of time. Gavin Cooney from the 42.ie, great stuff as always.
Cheers, Nathan.
Gavin Cooney there. You can hear that back on the app. And a reminder that all our football on Off the Ball is brought to you by Sky. All the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sport. And we're delighted to have Sky on board and say we've got lots of exciting things lined up over the course of the season with Sky. Just to bring you up to date with the Europa League and the Europa Conference League. A couple of games going on at the moment. Spurs 2-1 now in their Europa Conference League game against Mora. And in the Europa League, West Ham still 1-0 up against Rapid Vienna. Celtic now 3-0 down at home against Bayer Leverkusen. Kathleen McNamee's up next.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, it's an unmissable Super Sunday with Liverpool versus Man City, live on Sky Sports.
Whatever you watch, wherever you watch it, if you watch it on a TV, you must have a TV licence. It's the law. Get yours at tvlicence.ie or any post office. Brought to you by the Government of Ireland.
Some good news about climate change, for a change. Making your business greener while reducing costs is easy. Energia provides businesses with 100% green electricity, plus data-driven, energy-efficient solutions to reduce your carbon footprint and your bills. Call 1850 363744. Energia, the power behind greener business. T's and C's apply.
Cascading waterfalls, majestic mountains, stunning grounds and spectacular panoramic views across Kenmare Bay. Welcome to Sheen Falls Lodge, one of Ireland's finest 5-star hotels. Relax and enjoy stunning Kerry views of riverside and countryside from one of the Sheen Falls' beautiful bedrooms or private villas. Dine in an outstanding restaurant, unwind in our luxury spa, or venture outside for country pursuits, from fishing to falconry. For more information, visit sheenfallslodge.ie.
There's a gaggle of monsters you'll see around town, in every colour from bright pink to brown. And just like us, they have hopes, dreams and wishes. A new car, new windows, a holiday diving with fishes. They know just where to go for their dreams to come true. The local credit union who can help you out too. For all of your dreams that are big, small or strange, we've got you covered with our Monster Loan range. Monster Loans from the Credit Union. Imagine more. Loans are subject to approval. Terms and conditions apply. If you do not meet the repayments on your loan, your account will go into arrears. This may affect your credit rating, which may limit your ability to access credit in the future. Credit unions in the Republic of Ireland are regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
The name's Cudahy. Kieran Cudahy.
This week on News Talk, we've gone double O for James Bond Week. As No Time to Die is finally released in the cinema, we're celebrating all things Bond. From the biggest stunts to the coolest cars, the best gadgets, to the best way to make a martini.
Shaken, not stirred, obviously.
James Bond Week.
You expect me to talk?
No, I expect you to die, Mr. Coleman.
This week on News Talk.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky. Don't miss Brighton versus Arsenal on Saturday Night Football. Live on Sky Sports.
All right, you're very welcome back. It is Thursday's football show. Nathan with you this evening. Delighted to be joined in the studio by Kathleen McNamee of ESPN. How are you keeping?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
We were going to talk about the WSL, and we will talk about the WSL, which is well underway at this stage. But there's a huge story that's broke over the last 24 hours in US football. It is around the coach of the North Carolina Courage, who are a team we're very familiar with here in Ireland because Denise O'Sullivan and Diane Caldwell both play with North Carolina Courage. Their head coach, Paul Riley, has been accused by several former players of sexual coercion spanning multiple teams and leagues since 2010. This story broken by The Athletic's Meg Lenihan earlier today. Sinead Farrelly, who played for Riley at the Philadelphia Independence, New York Fury and Portland Thorns, said, "I felt under his control," and she detailed multiple incidents where she felt coerced into having sex with her coach. Not the only player to come out with these sort of accusations. It's a very new story. O'Reilly responded to a list of 23 questions from The Athletic about his alleged conduct with an email in which he stated the majority of the allegations are completely untrue. He wrote, "I never had sex with or made sexual advances towards these players." He said he sometimes socialised with players and occasionally picked up bar tabs, but I do not take them out drinking. This, I'm sure, has sent absolute shockwaves through soccer in America.
Yeah, it's been massive today. I think there have been a number of very high-profile incidents over the last year in the NWSL that a lot of people have said there needs to be some sort of culture change. I think there's almost this fear in the States because they've had two failed leagues that it's kind of hard for players to come forward, and even harder for other people who are, say, in their rookie season or are just talk about these issues, because there's almost this idea of we want the league to succeed and we don't want something else to take it down. But even this week, this is the second story to have broken. Richie Burke, who was the coach of Washington Spirit, has been completely banned from the league for similar allegations of emotional abuse and basically just behaviour that shouldn't be accepted in the league. This seems to really have been the thing that's kind of broken the whole story wide open. You have major US women's national team players like Alex Morgan said she was sickened by it and that she had many thoughts on the issue, but that she didn't want to talk about them at the moment. Becky Sauerbrunn, who's the US women's national team captain, also tweeted her support for the players who have come forward. And I think as well what we saw with this story is the NWSL's Players Union came out and they said that they want to see action from the league, and they put a deadline on it. So they put a deadline of October 1st, which is tomorrow, for the league to suspend people who were involved in this pending investigation. Also asking them to open an investigation, because there was an investigation into Riley in 2015,
right,
which the league said was closed, and when players tried to reopen it again this year, they didn't get responses from the league. And also there's been a lot of talk. There's another meeting tomorrow between the league and the Players Association, and there's some talk around that it might come to the point where players won't actually take to the field at the weekend, which would be a massive statement. And you also have other players now kind of, I think, feel emboldened to come forward now that they've seen this reporting and talk about other issues that they've had within the league. Players saying, I've never gone through these sort of allegations myself, but I know other players who have, or here's how I was mistreated in the league. So I think this has really sent shockwaves through, and is something that is going to roll for a long time. I don't think this is the sort of story that the NWSL is going to be able to put under the carpet.
And we have seen and covered over the last few weeks what's been going on around US gymnastics and the cover-up that took place in US gymnastics. And even when initially those brave women came forward and made the accusations that the FBI ignored it and US gymnastics ignored it and just tried to push it away to the side. So it does seem as though actually that the authorities, this wasn't the first time complaints have been made. And once again, as you say, leagues have failed before. They want to keep everything as quiet as possible, that they feel may not be in the best interests of the league for something like this to be made public.
Definitely, and I think it's actually been a moment for all parties that covered the NWSL to actually reflect on themselves. I've even seen some journalists say that maybe they didn't ask the same sort of questions that they would have because they were such a supporter of the sport, that they were so eager for things to work out and be successful. But I think, again, it's just that power dynamic is so off, and what you would see quite a lot in NWSL is particularly these male coaches getting opportunity after opportunity to coach teams even after these allegations hung over them. And there were always a sort of like unspoken secrets where people kind of knew about them, but there was never those people able to come forward and actually make the allegations in the first place. So I think it's really going to be a reckoning for the league and a chance for them to look at themselves and say, what can we do differently? How can we change our coaches and player structures?
Well, at a pure base level as to what is in place when, as you say, you have a huge amount of male coaches having an awful lot of interaction with young women. What measures have been put in place to try and prevent these sort of issues coming up?
Exactly, and players like Alex Morgan have talked about this in the past where they've contacted the NWSL looking for code of conduct or what sort of recourse there is for players, or even just what the kind of rules are in place to protect them, and found very little. And I think that's why now that the Players Association have taken it on themselves to say, we're going to provide you with a psychologist, we're going to provide a hotline that you can ring and anonymously tell whatever information you have and collect it all together and bring it to the league. But I think it's kind of interesting because once again in the NWSL you're seeing very much a player-led revolution. It was the same thing when the Black Lives Matter protests were happening last summer, and we saw a collection of black players from the league take the lead in terms of diversity and showing the league that this isn't good enough what you have in place, and this isn't good enough how you're protecting us. So, and again, I think it's probably, you could probably say this is a bit of the NWSL's Me Too moment in terms of, I don't think this is probably the last thing we're going to hear out of this story. But if it does bring some of that stuff up to the surface, then that can only be a positive in terms of eradicating it from the league.
So Paul Riley at the moment is the North Carolina Courage head coach. Before all of these accusations came out over the past few days, how highly rated was he within US football?
I think he was quite well respected. I mean, I interviewed him once a couple of months ago, and it was like a very pleasant chat. And again, North Carolina Courage would be one of the better teams in the league, so he is quite well respected. I know a lot of players like Denise O'Sullivan have talked before about how him bringing her over was really important to her career, and he's always spoken very highly of players like her. And I think it's interesting because I do think the Courage as well are quite a tight-knit group of players. Just when you hear them talk about each other, they're all very complimentary. They had quite a few big trades this summer, and you could see that they've kind of struggled since then. They've lost their last 3 games. And even before that, they were kind of in and out of the sort of form that you would expect from them. So I think he is well respected, quite well liked, but obviously there are these allegations now, and that's something that's going to need to be properly investigated.
One thing we obviously saw with US gymnastics is that they're able to hold out the dream of the Olympic dream, and that gives a huge amount of power. And I'd imagine it's a similar situation in women's football. There's not a huge amount of professional contracts, certainly not a huge amount of big professional contracts going around, so these coaches do hold the future of these athletes in their hands. So for the NWSL and its strength as a league, you've mentioned leagues have previously fallen away, not worked out for different reasons. A situation in a scenario like this, can this end up being a threat to the entire league? Because I'm sure sponsors will be coming out over the next couple of days, will be having massive issues with this, won't want to be associated rightly in any way with it.
I think there's a massive, I think there has, like, women's football in general has grown. Obviously in the US it's always been at a slightly higher level because of the US women's national team, but I think the league itself is probably well established enough that I wouldn't see it collapsing over the whole thing. And I also don't think the players would necessarily want that. I think they want a change in structures, and some bigger people may suffer the consequences of that. I mean, I think Lisa Barrett, who's the commissioner, will probably have quite a few questions to answer, but I can't see the entire league itself falling over this. If anything, I hope that the sponsors will put the pressure on the league to do better and to be better rather than pulling their support completely. And also, I think because this is against a particular coach, it's not really the fault of the players, and if that was to go, the people who would really suffer would be the players, and it would be another opportunity taken away for women's sport.
As I said, this story's really only broken over the last couple of days, so I'm sure there's a lot more to come over the next few days, and it's definitely a story we're going to come back to as well. So this side of the water, the Women's Super League season is well underway at this stage. 3 games played. Arsenal and Tottenham, top of the table. They both won their opening 3 matches. The surprise probably is Manchester City struggles down in 8th place, just 1 win so far and a heavy beating at the weekend. Arsenal, obviously there's a lot of interest in this country with Katie McCabe, the Irish captain, playing a slightly different role this season.
Yeah, and I think she seems to really be enjoying it. I think this is something you've seen with Jonas Edeval, the new Arsenal coach who came in, took over from Joe Montemurro. Montemurro was very much possession-based, liked his players to be on the ball, and they struggled as a result against teams like Chelsea and City, both of whom they've beaten this season already, and they're only 3 games into it. And what he's kind of seems to be promoting in the players is basically we don't have to have the ball all the time. I think City, when they lost 5-0 at the weekend to Arsenal, had 65% possession for most of the match. Arsenal weren't on the ball, and that gave players like Katie McCabe, who we know loves to run up from the defence and score those lovely goals that she is so good at doing. It's given the players a lot more freedom on the pitch, which is really great to see. And also you just look at Arsenal, I think they've invested really well this season, the sort of players that she's playing with, Tobin Heath, Viviana Miedema, Mana Iwabuchi. There has been a lot of anger around Arsenal the last couple of seasons that they haven't invested in the way City and Chelsea have, and I think what we've seen from them this summer was smarter investments and also bringing in the right sort of coach.
Because those investments, there was particularly after the World Cup last year, there was a huge amount of very eye-catching investments, and they all seem to be on different types of deals, where some were coming in on loan from the US, some are coming in on big transfer fees. Has it settled down a little bit, or is there still that sense of the top clubs trying to outdo each other?
I think especially last season with the US players coming in, it was very much COVID related, and it was interesting in the sense that it was, United and City that we saw taking in those players, even though they were only going to be there for a season. And both United and City have suffered this season. Possibly City more so because of their injury list. I think they have 11 injured players, and they're all quite high profile players, so you field a team with that alone with what they're missing. But I think Arsenal and Chelsea as well possibly have been smarter in their investments. Obviously they have brought in the stars. You see the likes of Chelsea having Pernilla Harder, like Sam Kerr, Frank Kirby. They're all very smart big names, but also there's more long-term investments in there as well, and I think that's really important. And even with Arsenal, you would have the younger players, I'd say the Lotwoman boys, who've been with Arsenal since academy days and very much have that whole sort of born at Hale End sort of vibe that Arsenal, the men's team has been missing for a while, but the women's team is still trying to kind of foster that, which is quite nice. I think there's like 4 players on the Arsenal team who are all childhood Arsenal supporters at the moment, which is like, it kind of creates a nice atmosphere around the place. And I know there was some complaints when they brought Tobin Heath in saying Arsenal doesn't need another forward, but when someone like Tobin Heath is available to you on a free transfer, there's absolutely no harm having her on the bench and being able to whack her on and score a goal.
Well, a good backup option, because Mia Dima is the superstar of the WSL.
Yeah.
Her goal scoring record is insane.
Yeah, I think it's like in 100 appearances, she had something like 105 goals. And I can't even track where it's at the moment, but it is insane. And I think like Arsenal are going to be trying really hard. Her contract's up in the summer. They're going to be trying really hard to keep her, and she's been very coy about what she's going to do. And part of me does wonder if bringing in these kind of bigger names, Manae Ibuchi, she played with her at Bayern Munich and they're very good friends. When she was with Aston Villa last season, after every game, the two of them were very close and chatting and things. So you would wonder if bringing in some of these players is also to convince her to say, you know, stick around, we have a lot to offer you.
And in terms of what they can offer those top players, we obviously spoke about Denise O'Sullivan there, but she was on the show a couple of weeks ago, and you know the obvious question is always, when are you coming back? Because it does feel as though the WSL is where it's at the moment, and Denise was saying, well, actually no, like, the league in America is still very strong. There's so many years ahead in many ways and established. For the best players in the world, do they want to be in the WSL now?
I think one of the great things is that the leagues are actually getting to such a better level that it is more spread out. You even look at, say, the Spanish teams like Barcelona, what they achieved last season was absolutely incredible. They wiped the floor with everyone in the Champions League. I think the style of play between the WSL and the NWSL is very different. NWSL is a lot more athletic. WSL is a lot more tactic focused, and I think it does kind of depend on the players. One of the major things that I know a lot of the Australian players would say, and other ones, is the fact that there's a defined season in the WSL, which they prefer. You know, you play your 22 matches, whereas a lot of players who are over in the NWSL, because of the wages, also go between the it's actually called A-League Women in Australia too, and that creates like 12-month cycle of you travelling quite a lot. Whereas the WSL, for a lot of players, especially if you're of that higher quality and you're going to, say, the top 3 or 4 teams, there's possibly more opportunity there for you. And then of course the other major thing with the US leagues is that because a lot of the US national team players are paid through the US Soccer Federation, it makes so much more sense for them to be there, and they're encouraged to be there. It's changed slightly under Andonovski, I think, maybe because as well there was the pandemic and the NWSL wasn't playing in the same way, but I think there is still that pull between the two of them, and both leagues would kind of say they're the best, but I think I enjoy watching them both for very different reasons.
How good is Katie McCabe? Because for so long we've spoken about Denise O'Sullivan, and Denise O'Sullivan, I think, was the only Irish player who was in the top 100 female footballers right now. But Katie McCabe, in the last 18 months, or post-COVID, really seems to have moved on to a different level.
I think so. I think she found a lot of confidence under Joe Montemurro. He seems to have really worked with her to find the sort of positions that suit her best and where she's comfortable. And I think he was also quite happy to build around her because she is so good. There was some anger at the end of the season last year that she wasn't given player of the league because she was that good. And I think the thing is, she's such an all-round player. You know, she's a leader, she can score goals, she's an incredible defender. And even when you look at the sort of goals she scores, like the power she can get behind them, the spaces she gets herself into, she's easily, between her and Denise O'Sullivan, they're probably Ireland's 2 best players. But I would say that for me, especially in a club aspect, Katie McCabe is probably the one that I would slightly elevate, especially over the last year or so.
All our football and off the ball is brought to you by Sky. All the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports. And one of the things you can watch on Sky Sports is the WSL. The interest levels that are there for the WSL, I know you're heading back to London over the next couple of weeks. Do you get a sense that the new television deal, the fact that they're giving it the full big broadcast every weekend, that it's making a difference, that we are seeing a complete transformation around these 2-3 years for the women's game?
I think so. I just think the ease that the broadcast deal brings is so important. You know, you can watch a Premier League game and then go straight to a WSL game. You know, I watched the North London Derby and went straight into watching City and Arsenal at the weekend, and it was just so easy. And even they said at the end of most broadcasts, they'll say, you can now switch and watch the other side of your team play if you want. I think it'll still be interesting to see how that translates into attendances, because a lot of the grounds are still small. They're very out of the way. They're not the easiest to get to, and sometimes when you have the ease of the broadcast, it might mean that less people actually end up at games. But I do think it's been so important, and even the fact that they do have this analysis before every game, you have proper analysis at halftime. Even for me personally, reporting on it, it's just made my life so much easier, because you're not running 5 different screens with no commentary and one camera that doesn't actually move past the centre of the pitch, kind of guessing what's happening down the other end. So I think it has been a massive advance for the game, and I hope that as these things continue to be shown and the Champions League grows and everything else, it'll only become bigger and better.
Yeah, it is hard to know where and what the right track is in terms of crowds and venues. We even see, I saw John Fallon had an article in the Examiner about the Irish team's game against Sweden, and maybe that game should be moved to the Aviva Stadium, that actually it's best team in the world coming to town. There's huge interest in the side that actually you'd fill Tala, and also maybe with COVID restrictions, maybe they can't have a full Tala because I think it's just the day before all the COVID restrictions lift, and you could have it at the Aviva, give it the sense of occasion. But then at the same time, if you have 10,000 at the Aviva, it can feel a little bit empty. And likewise, you see some of the WSL games are taking place at Old Trafford or at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, at the Emirates, where I think there's a huge crowd in at the Emirates for that. It is hard to get that balance of, do you go back to your smaller pitch where it's packed and there's a big atmosphere, or the sort of venue that everyone's used to seeing on TV?
Yeah, it is difficult. I also think as well for the Irish team it would be kind of interesting to see them play outside of Dublin, just to kind of keep promoting like women's football culture around the country, because it's not always the easiest for clubs to get up to Dublin for match days, especially as you said, if it is say a reduced capacity Tala or whatever it is. I would love for them to get the Aviva at some stage for one of the bigger games, like depending on the teams that are coming over, because I do think they would have a good shot. And also I think people are so eager to watch live sport now, because we haven't had it in the same way over the last year and a half, that it's such a good opportunity to attract people in. And even if it's stuff like you have teams playing at halftime, like on a pitch like an Aviva, you can like stretch that out so much. You could have so many more clubs, and that in alone is going to be like a couple of hundred kids and parents and supervisors and whoever it is. So I think there are definitely ways to encourage it and ways to get more people involved. And if they were to do a big event like the Aviva, it would be great if all of that kind of support was put behind it to get as many people there as possible.
Yeah, I put all my experience of the WSL down to the one WSL game I've been at, which was Manchester City against Chelsea, which was on the same day as Manchester City against Chelsea in the Premier League. And it was such a perfect setup, because the WSL game was on at midday or 1 o'clock, and the Premier League game was on at 4:30, and they had 8,000 people in the Academy Stadium, packed to the rafters, supporters from both sides who were going to the Premier League match straight afterwards. I'm thinking, this is the perfect setup. Like, there's no need to have this game in the Etihad, where actually you have 8,000 people, a proper big crowd. The quality is brilliant because you're two of the best teams in Europe at the time, and then like they just complement each other. They're not going up against each other in any way. And if you could have more clubs somehow coming up with that sort of a system, it feels like it'll work brilliantly. Yeah, and I think the thing as well about the Academy Stadium is it actually is one of the more professional WSL stadiums. So like when you're there, you feel like you're at a proper game, whereas I know some of the other ones, they are still quite small and they're quite rudimentary in how they appear. So I think if more league or more clubs could actually give those sort of facilities to their women's team, I think that's also as good a compromise at the moment if you are just trying to build that support. Kathleen, great stuff. Thanks for coming in the studio. Thank you.
Football on Off the Ball
with Sky. It's an unmissable Super Sunday with Liverpool versus Man City, live on Sky Sports.
If you're a business or organisation, this is a sound you don't want your callers to hear. On the 31st of December, 1850, 1890 and 076 numbers will go out of service for good. So if you want business as usual to sound like this, and not this, contact your operator today and choose your new 1800 free phone or 0818 standard rate number. Once you have your new number, notify your clients and customers immediately. For more information, visit comreg.ie/NGN.
At Audi,